Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today. It's been a really fun exercise to think back 10 years ago. What was the market like? What were the circumstances that led to the launch of the Green Bond Principles? So I've been a bit nostalgic and thinking back. 10 years ago, June 2014, I attended one of my first Green Bond conferences. In fact, it must have been one of the first ones that existed. It was a much smaller room, and I was thinking, what do I recall about that conference? And it has nothing to do with finance. It has nothing to do with climate or sustainability. What I actually recall, to be honest, was the shoes, which seems a bit strange, but it's symbolic for me, because what I recall is a room of largely bankers dressed in business suits with shiny shoes. And the reason I recall that is because I was, at the time, a research director at Cicero Climate Institute, where the footwear was typically Birkenstock sandals, sometimes with socks. So the reason I recall this footwear is it was symbolic of a meeting of both the scientific community and the financial community for me. But because we can't trust our memory very well, I did actually look through my files to find out what happened at this conference besides the shoes. So I found my speaking notes. Kind of surprising that I had such good electronic filing system, but I did find them after some searching. And my speaking notes say this. They say, big green potential. Only 0.04% of total bond market is green. So at that time, it was less than 0.1%. And we heard earlier today we're around 12% of global bond issuance. It's just tremendous to think about. I found something else interesting in my files. I found a presentation that I gave to the Cicero board, also summer 2014. And the title of the presentation, I had to laugh at this. It said, "We are alive." And I thought, what was this that I was presenting? I opened the presentation, and it was a screenshot of our website at Cicero that for the first time in 2014 advertised publicly that we were open to providing second-party opinions to the market. Now, some of you might recall, at Cicero, we provided the first second-party opinion back in 2008, setting up the model for the independent review when we provided that for the World Bank issuance. But being a nonprofit research institute, Cicero was concerned about the different types of shiny shoes and maybe a little bit of distrust of financial markets. What do we have to do with finance when we are researchers? And so it took a bit of convincing that actually we had a role to play as researchers in serving the financial community that wanted to find out more about climate science. So it was the first time the website went alive. So yes, we were alive. I also found an Economist article from around the same time period. And the quote from that article says, "Occasionally a market appears out of nowhere. So it is with green bonds." Well, it didn't really appear out of nowhere, we all know that. But we've also heard earlier today, the characterization of the green bond market up until 2014 was almost entirely the multilateral development banks issuing. And so it did feel like it appeared out of nowhere, because in the first half of 2014, half of green bond issuance was from corporates. So you can understand the landscape at the time when 13 banks came together to sign the Green Bond Principles. Perhaps there was some apprehension about opening up the markets to corporates, municipalities, other issuer types, potentially other regions in time. And it was concerned that issuers were talking about different things, maybe had different levels of integrity and follow through. So the Green Bond Principles helped set up a common framework, a common understanding of what it meant to be green. And these 13 banks took a risk to collaborate together when they might otherwise have competed with each other. What did these 13 banks have in common? They had the courage to innovate. The Green Bond Principles, I think, had success because it left flexibility enough to allow for that room to innovate. But would this grand experiment work? Well, with the Green Bond Principles, we had this flexible approach with guardrails that allowed, in my opinion, for innovation. And if we think about what does innovation mean, it means disruption, taking risk, testing, failing, learning, and ultimately improving. If we fast forward to today, over that expanse of 10 years, we have introduced green sukuks, regional diversity, taxonomies, regulation, social bonds, transition bonds, SLBs. We now have Shades of Green, which was a methodology first created at the Cicero Institute with the Birkenstocks, now scaled up with S&P ratings in our integrated team. And we have 12% approximately of global issuance being green. So we did achieve. We achieved in terms of volume. We achieved in part in regional diversity. But what about integrity? Actually, the majority of issuance that's labeled is aligned with ICMA principles, uses external reviews, whether that's S&P ratings or others. And misrepresentation in green labeling is not prevalent, as found by the ICMA Green Integrity Report. So for the most part, we've managed to keep ourselves honest in the market. Yet, are we really making a difference to the climate, to the environment, to sustainability? We have gotten very proficient at green labeling, very proficient at labeling for renewable energy refinancing, or electric vehicles, or green buildings. But what still eludes us is the tremendous gap in transition finance, which has been a theme of today, and I think a theme of the year that will continue. You heard Sean Kidney say, and I think we are in 100% agreement on this, we need every single sector to transition. And issuers that are facing that transition pathway, wherever their starting point is on the spectrum of green, they face limited options to connecting with responsible investors. So we have more innovation to do. And how have we fared on attaching impact with the labeled issuance? It's actually really challenging to measure. So thank you for the kind introduction, Simone. One of the things I spent the last few years working on was the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. Every 5 years, they take an international group of researchers to sift through the latest scientific literature. And one of the things that I was working on was looking through the literature on the green bond market. And I was trying to find out, well, what studies have been done to attach environmental impact to all of this great issuance we have? There's very little. It's very little. It's very hard to find evidence of this. We can find evidence of greeniums, depending on the market and the currency and the issuer type in some circumstances. But very little evidence that we are making a difference yet. And yet is the important word, because what we did find was evidence of a signaling effect, meaning that for issuers of labeled bonds, even if it's challenging to attribute the actual impact to the use of proceeds, we see a signaling effect of some corporations reducing emissions at the corporate level. That means to me that they've done some internal alignment across their financing sustainability departments in order to issue a labeled bond. So that gives me optimism for the future, that we will be able to measure the environmental impact of the labeled bond market going forward. But it also means we need more consistent and better data to compare those impacts. So when we meet again in 10 years, this is what I hope for. First, that we have an inclusive and encouraging market for heavy emitters, and that they are in the room with us. We need the steel producers in the room. We need the cement producers. We need the mining for enabling activities. And we need them to start their journey to green and motivate them to come further along the green scale. And I wish for impact, measurable and attributable sustainable impact to all of the activity we've done over the past 10 years. But perhaps most importantly, I hope we have the courage to innovate further, that we can learn, test, fail, and improve so that we can scale up for a sustainable future. Thank you.